Welcome everyone to Still and Moving Center's Gems from the Wisdom Traditions, a conversation circle. We are so pleased today that for our conversation on the moment of choice, we have Harald, who has made the choice to visit us from Sweden, 12 hours time difference away. So he's in the middle of his night, and to speak to us in terms of his experience from the standpoint, from the tradition of dance. I'll let Kevin, if you would, say a few more things about Harald.
Thank you. Harald, I've never met you, but I went to your Instagram and I've went to your website, and I just think it's fantastic. From what I understand, just a brief history. You're a professional dancer for several years in Europe, and then you had a brief stint in the field of videography and later found yourself in a career of change management. And you've done podcasts, you have now this company with a website, Me in 10 Years, and you help those who are transitioning from the stage or theater life and literal leaps of faith moments, making changes in their lives. So with that, I will hand it over to you, who I'm sure can give a little bit more background, but thanks so much for being here. We're thrilled to have you.
Thank you so much, Kevin, and thanks, Renee, also for this invitation. Hello, everybody. Thanks for having me today. Well, Kevin, I think you summed it up really nicely. I think I should have hired you for all my marketing, really, but no, I think this is pretty much it. I'll be happy to add things later, but it is true that I used to be a professional ballet dancer. I was born in Vienna, in Austria, and that's where I discovered, the art of ballet, and I started to practice it myself, and eventually I had the possibility to become a professional dancer. And I did that for about, like 15 to 20 years. I was, on stage and touring the world, working in Austria, in Germany, and in France, and then eventually going into video filmmaking, really, mainly for dance companies. I did that for 10 years full time, and then I actually discovered change management. And what I found really interesting for me was that it wasn't like one or the other. Like it wasn't so much about the discipline of, it was more mindset, and I found so many parallels between having been a professional performer and in change management, that for me it was like an obvious evolution rather than a change of career paths, because there were just so many things that I thought, oh, this is what we used to call that in dance, but that's exactly the same what a corporate environment is looking into, or what they are considering, or what they realize that needs to maybe be addressed. So I managed to build all those bridges, and that's actually what led me in the end also trying to help or assist or to share my knowledge with people who are in the professional artistic field today, performing arts, and trying to develop a new career, because terminology is not the same, mindsets are not the same, it all looks very different, but if you really get to the bottom of things, it is very similar. And there's so much, if you know what it's called, you can really help yourself by what they call transferable skills, and just not learn anything new, but just learn how they call it in corporate, and see how that actually makes you have so much knowledge already, and it is beyond the ability to move. Obviously that's that's what you need to do when you're a dancer, but it's not, you're not just a professional moving machine when you're a dancer. So anyway, that's just to add a bit of my background thinking about all of this, what it means to be a professional dancer. What I've just to give you a bit of structure, actually, I prepared about 3 different areas. Let's call them topics, but 3 different examples of topics that I think would be relevant to mention. Okay, so three little sections with 3 small questions, which don't have a particular answer. I mean, there's nothing. It's not a yes or no thing, and it's not a right or wrong answer kind of. It's just food for thought question kind of thing. Well, I'll gateway into what I started already, is that I started to dance when I was 7 years old. And I think what was really interesting, so that was like the late 70s, and my sister, she was a big ballet fan. She's older than me, and she loved ballet. She wanted to dance herself, but because she was a girl and she was older, and because of the times, my parents didn't think that they didn't really support her in that. Let's put it that way. Me being the younger, sweet little brother, I had apparently more freedom, it seems. My sister's 9 years older than me, so by then maybe everything had just eased up, and I often went with my sister to see performances because I thought if she loves it that much, it must be really great. So I became really curious and I said, "Oh, can I just come with you and see?" And then I saw it like a live performance in the Vienna State Opera with a live orchestra, like I don't know, 50 to 60 people on stage. And when you're 7 years old, it really impacts you. I mean, it's very, it's very impressive to be exposed to that kind of energy and performance. So I fell in love with it. I loved my sister, and I thought if she likes it, it must be good. And then I saw it for myself, and I thought this is amazing. Just the lines, the music, the aesthetics, the beauty, everybody made up like a Christmas tree, basically. It just felt like amazing. So I was like, this is for me. I want to be part of this. And my parents or anybody in my family, I mean, no artistic background whatsoever, like maybe people whistling or, I think I had a granddad who played the accordion, but that was pretty much my artistic, other influences that I had. But my parents were supportive, and they said, well, we have no idea how you can learn to dance, but let's find out, and then by chance, I think, somebody just said, oh, there's this ballet school and everything. And I ended up going to the opera ballet school in the end. And that's the thing. It's always, obviously, there's some kind of intention, but then also there was the luck moment where somebody actually tells you, oh, there's this ballet school, and then I was lucky enough to actually get in, and then they didn't throw me out, kind of. Anyway, so there's always a mix I found with those things, that it was, you need to know approximately what you want, but at the same time, you also need to be lucky to find the right people and have, be given the opportunity to actually pursue that idea. So there was a very strong emotional connection. And what was interesting was, obviously at the time, in late 70s, I mean, in Austria, I consider it as being Austrian, a rather conservative city. Vienna, definitely at the time, it was classical ballet or nothing. If you wanted to dance, there was basically the real dance. There was classical ballet. So the opera ballet school, that was pretty much it. Very much Russian style, built on rigor and discipline. But hey, we were kids, so we still had fun and everything. But that made me think, actually, in the preparation for this, and also I think I had those thoughts already some time ago. If you look back at the history of ballet, it was founded, like classical ballet was founded by the French Emperor Louis XIV, and he the sun, the king of sun, I guess you call him in English, the Sun King. Just known for his lavish lifestyle and his big parties and everything. But if you look, so he invented that sort of art form of ballet. And I thought what was interesting was that, of course, as flamboyant and as crazy as it might have been for amazing parties, in the end of the day, I think it was much more than entertainment. It was a sort of demonstration of, skill, of hierarchy, of being able to put together something rather complex, both physically moving in a complex way, in a very unnatural way, but also, arranging like a whole performance, which is a rather complex operation. And so, coordination, power, hierarchy, aesthetics, and that's where ballet was born. And I think it is, for me, and you can, of course, disagree with me, but it almost seems to me like it was invented like a military parade kind of thing, a show off of physical and technical skills, in an environment that's made to impress the viewer. Because military parades, that's what they are. They have no function to defend anything. They're just showing off what you can do, what you could do, and basically send out a signal. It's a form of communication. We have all those different arms. We have all those different people who are super organized. Like one says go and 50 people go. It's basically just conveying strength. And I think one must not underestimate that Louis XIV was still an emperor. I mean, he was he was a very powerful man. He wasn't, of course, he might have, want to party, but honestly, I think he also wanted to be in power very much. So those performances were definitely, and that I know for a fact, they were performed to people who were invited to his court, and foreign people. So it was really made to send a message, But of course, so why am I telling this? Because as a child, of course, I had no idea about that sort of tradition of dance. I had no idea that there was this sort of rigor and military almost element to it. For me, it was just the beauty of something my sister liked. So I felt emotionally connected to her. And so I thought, well, this must be great because she likes it. And I just liked the aesthetics. I thought the makeup and the costumes and those really beautiful lines and everything was so well set up. It just seemed like, whoa, this is impressive, and so I just felt basically what it did to me, but I didn't really question, what's underlying all of this. Where does it come from? This sort of communication. So, what I did, I think what I never did in a way was I never sort of and of course, that's asking a bit much of a 7 or 10-year-old child. I never sort of analyzed my values and the underlying values of the art form. Because I think, actually, today I know myself a bit better, and I would think they're probably not a perfect match. But of course, when you're a child, you never go into that kind of depth. You can't grasp the dissonance it might create, between these hierarchy and power constructs that exist, of course, in classical dance. The usual classical, your usual classical ballet company is going to be very hierarchy orientated. Corps de ballet, like soloists and principal dancers, and even below the corps de ballet, you might have apprentices. So everything's very much in ranks. Everything's there's the choreographer, there's the ballet master, there's it's everybody's has their role, and it's not there for negotiation really. So the question that I would like to leave with you at that point is when you go about what you do, how much or what do you know about your own values in relation to the underlying values of what you are doing? Have you ever thought about what are your values? Are you aware of them? And then looked at actually discipline you're working in, or that you exercise your hobby or your work in, and try to see what are the values that come from the tradition of that kind of occupation or that kind of skill or work, and is that a perfect match? What's the correlation there? I think that's an interesting question that I definitely never asked myself when I was in training, because nobody asks that question. So that would be a first bubble of thought. My second bubble of thought was the tradition of the physicality of ballet. And in classical ballet again, your training basically teaches you how to not to defy gravity, but to make the spectator forget that gravity exists. If you think of point shoes, if you think of the jumps, the leaps, everything's made to look as if you can go beyond gravity. Physical laws don't apply to ballet dancers kind of things. You just turn, you whiz around 7 times and you stop, or you jump and you suspend it in the air, or you're doing movements, you kick your legs, but you're also extending them in order, there's all those different movements which are supposed to give the illusion that you can do things that actually are not supposed to be possible. And of course, that is the beauty and I guess the fascination of watching it, because you go like, whoa, that's just, it just strikes you that, that somebody would be able to do that. But below, linked to all of that is, of course, that basically make the audience forget that gravity exists. And so that everything's light, effortless, you do unnatural movements like turnout, like 180-degree hip rotational turnout. A very, very unnatural movement. I have a friend who used to be a ballet dancer for ABT, American Ballet Theatre. And he's a medical doctor now in Los Angeles. And he said at some point to me, he said, Harold, classical ballet is actually an assault on your body. And I mean, he was half joking, but he was also fully serious, actually saying it. You know, all the movements that you're supposed to do perfectly, they're just against what the body wants to do or should be doing from a medical point of view. So if you keep all of that in you know, just in your mind, it becomes, you know, well, even I have one example, a practical one. It is about breathing. And I remember my teacher still at the time, he said, you know, when you're out of breath, which obviously you get out of breath if you start jumping around for like 3 minutes nonstop, but the audience should not see that. So so he taught us to breathe without showing that you're breathing deeply, which is basically breathing into your ribcage towards the sides. And I don't know, I guess most of you are familiar with, you know, breathing exercises from yoga or something. And it's like the last thing you want to do if you want to relax is breathe not into your stomach. But that's basically what we've been taught for 10 years. Don't breathe into your stomach because the audience will be able to see that. You know, every singer they're going to spend hours learning to breathe properly with their stomach, you know, because that's where the power comes from. But as a dancer, you're supposed to develop the same power, but by breathing into your ribcage. So when you're completely out of breath, you can still up here, nothing's happening, you know? And I think that for me sums it up pretty nicely, that sort of creating an illusion of something that obviously physically isn't possible. You know, you are out of breath. You don't want to, I mean, your body needs the oxygen. And in that regard, I thought it was really interesting to consider contemporary dance as a logical evolution from classical ballet. If you know, classical ballet being the only performing arts form of dance up to the beginning of the 20th century. At the beginning of the 20th century, you had an evolution towards contemporary dance, which continued into later into that era. And for me, I think what is really interesting to consider is that it's more than just different movements. I think it is basically to say, listen, guys, ballet is great, but it's completely unnatural. It's something actually dishonest because gravity does exist. It is heavy. It is tiresome. So why hide it? So I think the contemporary dance evolution was actually almost an evolution not towards different movement, but towards more honesty. It was about, if you're tired, show us that tiredness. If you feel heavy, show us the weight. You know, like somebody walking like I don't even want to say like an elephant, because elephants walk very, very with a lot of care actually, but it's like walking like a piano basically. You know, it's just like, whoa, it's just weight onto the floor. You know, it just slams down and that's it. There's nothing breaking it because you're just exhausted, you're heavy, and that's walking with weight, you know. So I think contemporary dance in that sense for me is basically opening up the window towards recognizing the truth or something, just reflecting actually what's really going on. And then the consequence will be a new set of movements. But I think one mustn't reduce that evolution to just the evolution of different movement. I think that would be wrong, because I think the intention actually comes from a very different place. It comes from, for me, it comes from a place of honesty. So my second little bubble question would be, you know, how can you train yourself to create that kind of awareness about what you do in order to, you know, be more honest? And honest, why honest? Because you want to connect with the audience. And there I want to, what I said before, these bridges, these parallels, you know, these things that connect for me mindset-wise without disciplines. Your audience can be, of course, you know, for a dancer would be the audience in the auditorium, but it can be, your audience can be your clients. It can be in management, the people who work with you. You know, how can you create that kind of honest relationship that you actually, what you express is what you mean. It comes from a place of, you know, this is what it is actually, you know. And again, it has nothing to do with being frank or, I don't know, like straight to the point or impolite. That's not what I mean. What I mean is really being clear with yourself where it comes from, being aware when you are tired, being aware when, you know, when certain things happen to you, that you actually are self-reflective and you're aware of those tendencies or those inputs, and that, of course, it allows you normally to express yourself very differently and have a very different, address people in a different way. If you feel tired, there's no point blaming others for not being energetic, you know, But that of course happens in management, or when you have an audience with a product and they just don't like it as much as you like it. It might not be the stupid audience or the stupid client. It might actually be maybe you need to gain awareness about your product, So I think this is where for me those connections are. I hope that sort of resonates. And my third little bubble is about creativity. And, for me, creativity, it is this childlike curiosity that enables you to transform your thoughts into something more or less tangible, but something that you can share with others. And through sharing it with others, they can experience it too. And again, when I thought about it, today, if you go into marketing, for example, and you will invent a product that the audience your clients, I use clients, audience. For me, it's the same kind of category. I consider a client like an audience in a way, but anyway, the main thing is that your idea, which is a pure abstract fabric of your mind, whatever's in there, there's just no access. I can't get in there. You can, but then of course, if you started talking about it, you can write a book about it, a text about it, you can have a conference, you can build, like a pen or something and say, well, this is the idea I had. Look, what do you make of it? This is when things become tangible. And this is when your creativity actually, and that for me is creativity, when you can actually translate it from in there to out here. And again, it can be voiced out, it can be a physical thing, it can be an expression with your body as a dancer. But the main thing is that the other side, client audience, they can experience it with their own senses. And from that onwards, it is a creation. It has emerged. Something purely abstract has emerged in the space that others can actually now manipulate and consider and not understand or love it or whatever they do with it. But now you can actually talk about this third element. There's you, there's me, and there's this third element now. So for me, as a child, of course, there are ways of doing that. As adults, we do it differently. Many adults working in creative professions, they put in a lot of effort trying to regain that sort of spontaneous creativity that everybody has naturally anyway. And society sort of, just trains it away. So you become, so you fit in. But I think with my dance training, eventually that ambition of what I've just said, what my understanding of creativity is, became more and more conflictual. Because if you think back of what I said earlier, that ballet, for me, it is almost like a military discipline with a lot of rigors, rules, different hierarchies, people deciding, others deciding less. And then you have on the other hand, you have this sort of ambition of, having an idea and transforming that into something you can share. Well, for me, with ballet, that was not what was required in many situations once you're a professional dancer. I felt really reduced of being a tool. Some like a creator would use me and then I would be enabling them to create what they want to show. But that is not necessarily a very creative process. That is just a, whatever you want to call it, hammer and screwdriver moment. It's just, do I use that tool or do I use that tool? Because I need to do a certain job, but you're not the one manipulating the tool. You are the tool as a ballet dancer in a professional ballet company normally. So that started to conflict in me, of course, because for me, I like, when I was the 7-year-old child with my sister, I fell in love with what I saw on stage, what had been created on stage. And I felt like, this is amazing. I want to be part of this, but not just, not just part of the set design. I actually want to be part of this creative process. So Renee, actually, we exchanged quickly before this talk, and we spoke about that sometimes, you see some performances, maybe dance performances or something, and you just don't get it. You sit there and they're moving around, you can see the effort, but it just does not impact you in any way. It's like, it's interesting, but it's kind of, it just doesn't touch you. There's just nothing happening there on an emotional level. You can see the colors and you can see the, whatever, you can see them doing their thing, but it's basically like watching a fish, like a fish bowl, like I'm on this side and the fish on the other side. You know exactly where the frontier is. You know exactly they're in there and you're out there. There's just no connection. You're not putting your hand in it. You're not swimming in there. You're just watching it from the outside, like in an aquarium. It's beautiful, but once you're done, you're done. You know, that's it. And I think that is, again, I think if you're in management or if you're in marketing or if you're as a dancer, your main concern is always the audience. How can you create that connection? How can you get the audience to get their hands wet? You know, how can you include them in your universe, but not through a glass window, but by them forgetting that they're sitting in a theater, or by them forgetting that it's just a job, yeah, or just a product. How do you get that? And of course, you know, there are many great enterprises and good examples where they do manage that amazingly well, you know, to the point of manipulation, where you almost forget that you walked into the theater. You know, you just suddenly want to have it and you don't even know why. But I think for me, that's why for me today, I don't need the dance anymore in order to feel like a creator or to feel that I'm shaping something. You know, for me, I've changed disciplines. Because I also felt that, especially in the classical ballet world, there isn't, you know, if you're not a choreographer, or if you're not in and even they are very restricted by politics, because obviously in national theaters, especially Europe, money comes, you know, you have to align with people who give you the money, which is normally, you know, artistic freedom, yes, but it's not 100%, you know. So anyway, my point is that for me today, being in change management and working with people as a coach, it is a moment where I still use that capacity to try and connect and try and get them to see a new perspective. And as a performer, I think that's exactly what I did as well. You know, whatever I performed, it was always about the audience experiencing a new feeling, an emotion, something. And by the end, hopefully, of the performance, they would walk out of the room and just feel that they would feel differently. They would consider something in different light. They would maybe talk about what they had experienced with somebody, which eventually will have an impact on who they are and who they become. And that is absolutely possible in other circumstances than performing as a dancer on stage. And this is for me the core of, I think, what fascinated me so much when I was 7 years old, that transformation. You know, and when I saw a dance performance, that was the technical skill that they used to demonstrate that. But it is actually about this transforming an audience, transforming your thoughts, and hopefully giving people something that they wouldn't have experienced without you. So my very last question, bubble question, would be, you know, how today in your work and practice can you create those moments of connections? You know, that would be for me a very interesting question, and it is something that goes both ways, because as a performer on stage, you always, you know, you can tell after a performance if the audience liked it, how the energy in the room was. And I think this is also in management, also in marketing things, you need to be able to have a bi-directional communication sort of thing. It's not just about you giving it all. It's also about you being receptive to see how is this all being received, because maybe it's just overwhelming and you need to tune it down a bit. You know, more isn't always better. You need to pick up the audience the right way so they can come with you on that journey. So this communication, you know, is extremely important. And that eventually also in your creative process can really help shape, you know, make this abstract idea into something that actually resonates, and develop it then almost as like a co-creation with the audience. I think that's it. I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Harold, from what you led up to until the very end, when you ask us how we could create these moments of connection, which we only do by choice, of course, in our daily lives. And you said that it's not just about us giving more, but also about us being more receptive in order for us to make those moments of connections with others that can be transformative. And it seems as though what you're saying is we can't just do things the same way all the time. when we're in this moment of choice, we come prepared, like you talked about, all that discipline that went behind, being a professional dancer. And yet to be able to really connect, you've got to be not just performing it the same way every time, but somehow having your kind of antenna out, right? To mold the experience to the occasion, to the people who are you're with. Am I hearing something like that? And I wonder what other people think too. Go ahead, Harold.
For me, just one phrase. That's exactly how it is. If I remember back, I worked at the opera in Berlin. That's about 2,000 people watching when it's full. And performances started at 7:30, 8 o'clock or something. And it didn't matter what day of the week, but the point is everybody who comes into that room, they all came with a different story before entering that room. Some maybe have said goodbye to their kids and they had a babysitter. Some don't even have any kids. Others just rushed from work into that room to watch the performance. The thing is, for me as an artist, obviously I don't know, but the thing is you can see where the audience is when you come in. Within a few seconds, you just feel, like I said, this energy in the room, but it isn't anything. It is something you learn to interpret. It isn't something just metaphysical that is out there. It is literally something you feel very quickly just from the noise in the room, from the how bodies breathe, how a mass of bodies moves. You know, after like 20 years on stage, you do pick those things up. So you know exactly this audience is just, I don't know, Sunday morning matinee kind of thing. Okay, whoa, we're very low in energy and sugar here, so you need to just start slowly and then build it up, ramp it up. And then eventually at the end, you have like everybody ecstatic and they're happy. But if you start straight away with 110% energy, they're just going to be overwhelmed. It's going to go over their heads and they're just going to go like, whoa, that was crazy. I don't know what just happened, which isn't really what you want to happen either. So yes, it is two-directional, and you need to be, it isn't just about what you do. It's about you do something. Okay, how does that land with you? You need to create that kind of relation. If you want to take the audience somewhere, if you want to really be transformative with them, it's not that you can't be egoistic. You can be, but you will completely lose the audience on the way. And I think then you get performances where you sit there and it's a fishbowl moment, where it's just them doing their thing and you do your thing, and you start wandering off in your thoughts and you plan whatever, your dinner or what are you going to buy for Christmas.
Oh, I'm so interested to hear what our participants might have to say on this topic.
I am studying, in the field of psychology, the aspects of career development and how psychology applies to that. So it's all about this change management. And one of the very first things that you look at are drilling down to people's interests and values as a part of that exercise, if you're counseling someone in what their next career move might be. So that was fascinating to hear your perspective and how it's tying to where I'm at right now. But the other part was when you got to section 2, the physicality of ballet. One of my favorite Instagram feeds is called Impossible Moves. And it has a huge number of participants, people watching this, because people are doing things that seem to defy gravity. They seem to defy the laws of physics. And it's what people are interested in. People want to be transformed into something beyond what is the ordinary, I think. And so I'm going to speak on behalf of classical ballet and say that it really did, in fact, it had that purpose. And just to relate it back to psychology again is, according to many theorists, we have as human beings this innate drive to expand beyond what seems to be possible now, to grow, basically. So I mentioned this in terms of Maslow's need hierarchy before, that we are all seeking this something beyond. So that's my thoughts. Thanks. Amen.
Alice, it looks like you had something you wanted to mention. Alice is
Hey.
a Feldenkrais teacher for us at Still and Moving Center, by the way.
Hi, well, thank you for the presentation. Yeah, so many thoughts. So I started ballet at, I think I was age 5 or 6 even. And fortunately, it felt like unfortunately at the time, but fortunately for me was not good enough to become professional ballerina. But I danced until 17 or 18 and so resonated with your wonder, your draw to the art form. And it's interesting, so much resonates about what you said. And I was involved with yoga for years and was a yoga teacher, and then found Feldenkrais about 8 years ago. And it's been sort of this unwinding of those really deeply ingrained ways of cutting myself off from what's happening physically. You described the breathing practice, absolutely, how to, create these sort of unnatural constraints to show a sense of ease. And it's fascinating because, as David was saying, I mean, there's beauty in that. There is this drive to keep raising the bar about what we can accomplish physically, and having some wisdom and discrimination around when that tips over into something that's individually really damaging is important. But this, I find in my Feldenkrais experience, this sort of, as I'm unwinding this very deep old learning from ballet and our culture and everything about, more is better and push and harder, it's like I'm becoming more connected with, able to understand what my values are. So it's like my sense of myself, my awareness of myself, and my being in touch with what my values are is unfolding as I sort of unwind myself physically and deepen this Feldenkrais practice. So it's an interesting, and that honesty, I think, too, and the willingness, the capacity and the willingness to be honest and to be receptive and open and more sort of interactional, not kind of hiding behind a physical facade. So anyway, lots of food for thought there. I appreciate it. Thank you.
I want to thank you for that talk. I mean, it's a whole new way of looking at ballet that I've never thought about. It was just incredible and very thought-provoking. And I am very blessed to be a life coach. So I journey with people all the time from a place of my intention is love and compassion for myself and others, and journeying with them for them to find out their intention and to be more honest and then connect with others. But what I was thinking about was not professionally what I'm doing, but how in our lives that if we know our intention or we know our values, and then to be aware of how we're living them and how we're actually demonstrating them in our daily lives, and how when we do that and we're honest and vulnerable, that we connect with other people. We can make that co-creation even in a moment of a cup of tea, and just to really feel that those 3 parts is, what is my intention and my values? And the second was, am I aware of myself? And the third is, how do I create that with someone else? And I think those are really important parts, because those are all choices we make. And the choice of who am I and how am I aware of myself, and how do I really deeply connect to another with intimacy. So I really want to thank you. That was a great talk with that's just my initial thoughts. I feel like there's a lot of thoughts going around, but I think it's so true in our very daily life of how we live it. It's like, how do we create a moment of love and joy with anybody that we're with or in this circle, because we're being vulnerable and honest. And our intention is to do that, is to be that vulnerability and to create something. So thank you very much. It was very good.
I grew up dancing as well. I still dance every now and then, and it's been great now that restrictions have been lifted, that I can actually be in a room again. But I do know once we, as a studio, put together a piece or a performance or something like that, like you were saying, we sometimes had to adapt to the audience. If we were doing, a performance for elderly people, because oftentimes we tried to do community outreach and things like that, we made the conscious choice to pick, songs by Frank Sinatra or people that they were familiar with. We wouldn't want to come in there with Nicki Minaj or one of these other people. So I think it's really very poignant when artists make that choice to make the right one. And I think in pop culture today, we often see when they make the wrong choice. We don't necessarily always hear about the good choices, but if something goes wrong, we certainly definitely always hear about it in the media. But on the topic of choice too, I got to thinking, I think of all these applications we have nowadays, like DoorDash for delivery of food. You open this app and there's hundreds of restaurants to choose from, and then hundreds of menu items. And I just find that seeing my niece and nephew growing up, I find that I think choice is more overwhelming in a sense to them because there are so many options. Even if you think of these streaming services nowadays, Netflix, Hulu, all of these things, people have over, probably 500 options to choose from, and they still can't find a movie to watch or something like that. And I think that just simple things like movies or food, I hate to think what trouble they have with more complex situations like finding a healthcare provider or something like that. So I think that choice sometimes could be a struggle as well. It's not always about making the right choice, but it's how do I go through that process of choosing and what will that outcome be then? Just something that I was thinking about.
Harald, any thoughts you want to add in here?
Sure. Thank you so much, everybody, for your kind words, and I'm grateful to hear that I managed to connect a bit and provoke some thoughts. I think this is what it's all about. Being, this is what I enjoy doing. You see, and I didn't dance, and I still managed to do that, and this is what gives me today's satisfaction, and that is actually for me a creative process. I could have something in here, and by verbalizing it, I could actually connect and have an impact with other people. And I think this is what it's all about, and then you choose your skill or your art or your way of doing that. But that's for me just, that's just an outlet. But you need the intention. You need to be aware what matters to you. We spoke about values. And I think to connect with Kevin, what he said was, these moments of choice, for me, it's almost, it just made me think that there's this outside-in approach of choice making, like you have whatever, Netflix, and you don't know what movie to watch. Or maybe it isn't Netflix who should answer that question. Maybe you should, before you even switch on Netflix, just say, well, how do I feel? Do I actually want to watch a film? What kind of film do I want to watch? What kinds of films do I like, actually? And those things, of course, Netflix can never provide. And I think this is where many people find dissatisfaction and even frustration, because they feel like I have so many options and still nothing's good enough or nothing's right. Well, of course, because if you don't know what you're aiming for, anything will always be wrong, or it will never satisfy you. It would just distract you maybe, and I think that work in a way today with age also, I think this is maybe the luxury of age, that you have, if you were lucky enough to work on yourself, to really find out who you are and what your values are, you can walk through life with so much, maybe you're older, but you walk through life with so much more, I don't want to say intensity, but consciousness, I guess. And that, of course, even the small things will make you happy, because you can really appreciate them because they connect directly with something that feeds your soul. And that's ultimately what makes you happy, So I think this is an inside out approach, it's like knowing what you stand for, what's important to you, and then seeing, maybe sometimes Netflix can provide, and then Netflix is the best thing in the world, but it isn't because it's Netflix, it's because it's aligned with what you need, and you know what that is. So that's I think that very much resonated what Kevin said, and also for Alice, thank you so much for sharing your insights, like unlearning some of the things or getting rid of layers and stuff. I think that's such a wonderful way you described that. And with David, also your example of from your work, I think that's it was very, very thought-provoking for me too. Thank you. And Diana as well, everybody who said something, thank you. And also in the chat I saw Manita, I saw your comment as well. Thank you so much for that.
I think about all those kids in ballet school. They're like collateral damage in this in this expansion of what it means to be human, or what human capacity is. And that's why we don't start ballet at age 60. Better to start at age 3 or 4. But I love the analogy with the martial arts as well, because I think that was a very fascinating idea that Louis XIV was doing this somewhat as a power play and as a way of demonstrating his power, and that it raised the bar. I love Alice's phrasing of that we're raising the bar.
One of the things I love about the idea of moments of choice is that they're perpetual, that we're always in a moment of choice. So that even if we've made past choices that didn't align with, say, what our values were, didn't live up to the standards that we want to hold for ourselves, well, here we are in a new moment of choice, just every single moment. And of course, how we prepare does help to kind of determine the outcome of what those choices are. Nevertheless, there's just something so hopeful to me about having those perpetual moments of choice. Oh, good. Truth's got his hand up. It looks like maybe he can talk and drive.
Hi, I caught the first 2/3 of it because I'm on my way to work. I walked into a venue. I also work with events, and so in concert venues, they raise the volume with each act sometimes. So the first act, people that get used to how loud it is, and so they make it louder throughout the event. And I work on lighting, and so often we will have simple lighting set up for the opening act, and then as towards the main, you want to save some effect for the main act so that it still impresses the audience.
Thank you, Truth, for that. I think I just want to say that this with performances, I think that is in a way that the work of a director, a choreographer, director, whatever discipline you're performing, but it is really crafting that sort of path for the audience. And the main thing is that you pick them up where they are. That little last bit, that's where the artist comes in, because obviously the creator has a kind of idea, and normally it's built into the production, so you will be able to pick up the audience. You know, sometimes nowadays you already have some ambient sound that's going on. You have some, with lighting design, you have already maybe some ambience in the auditorium that actually transforms the space. So the audience basically goes into this into this universe, into this world of the creator, what they have imagined. So you sort of, you're being channeled into that, and the transformation starts in that moment already. You know, you leave the outside world behind. And that is very much a question of craft. And again, I think that is also sometimes when I have those fishbowl moments, I have a feeling that there's a lack of craft from the people who have created that, you know, because they didn't know how to create that. There might be creators of movement, but that's not enough to transform an audience.
Do you think it's in a way drawing attention towards the metaphysical? Like to shift attention from the physical world in ballet to the world, like to the surreal or to the imagination? That
is probably what's part of it, especially if you look at the stories that were being told. If you look back at Swan Lake or Giselle or some of those big classics, I mean, of course, it's, you know, the story as such is completely fabricated and fictitious and just made up. And I guess if you add to that movements that are out of this world, I guess it adds up, it lines up with the universe that they tried to create, of something that just is in fairy tale land. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because besides Louis the 14th's, grandiose kind of wishes to enhance his stature in the world's eyes, nevertheless, there must have been something behind it that would touch someone like a 7-year-old who has, wonderful ideals and for whom the world of magic is still quite real. And so no doubt there have been people over the hundreds of years that ballets have been in existence who felt a real inspiration and really did want to touch other people's lives, not just to make a martial show of power and strength, I imagine. There was something nevertheless inspirational about the format that people could use for higher motives, perhaps.
For me, definitely the case. I mean, for me, well, let's put it that way. I like when things are very symmetrical, aesthetic. And so I think the tendency of where classical ballet originated, it naturally lined up with probably things that I had a very strong drive, that I was driven towards, symmetry and power, like the music, or even big jumps, like spectacular things. So there was definitely elements in there, and it was built up obviously in a very well-crafted way. So they had the right impact, and especially for me, it was just like, whoa, straight to my heart. And I was like, whoa, this is amazing. I want to be part of this. And the funny thing, if anybody wants to know, because not so much earlier, I had fallen in love with football, and I went for one season, I played in a local football club because I was so drawn to the physical aspect of football, like running and the team spirit and having a goal and like these challenging moments. But there was one element I just disliked so much, and it was the way people spoke to each other. It just turned me off. I came home and I said to my parents, I'm sorry, I don't want to do this anymore, because the way people talk, it's not me. They would use swear words, or they would scream at each other. And there was just a culture attached to it that I just personally, it just didn't attract me. It wasn't what I was used to. And it wasn't, that's probably more like it. I wasn't used to talking like this at home. And, nobody screamed around in our family. So it felt just like, I don't know, it wasn't the right place for me. But I did like the physical aspect. And so for me, ballet sort of offered that. It was the physical aspect, but then there was all the rigor and all the not shouting around. And so it was funny how that sort of, was just second best kind of thing, and it worked.
I was just curious, in the beginning, when ballet was invented, who was the audience for ballet? This was not the typical 7-year-old. It was the audience. It was the aristocracy from.
I definitely think the aristocracy was definitely, if you look at the Vienna States Opera, it is a building. When it was built, it was definitely not made for the masses. It was built for the privileged. And in that sense, coming to one of those performances that were transformational or that were magical, in a way, being in the audience was part of that spectacle. That you were also, you wanted to be seen. You were in a place that was representative, that was not for everybody, and you were in there. So it was also, as an audience, you were sending a message, basically, of just being the audience. I think today, fortunately, I mean, it has moved on, and I think that area, that aspect, in a way, it has become more democratic in the sense that you can maybe still have those privileged environments, but you can also have places where people really just come together for the right reasons or for other reasons. Not to say that right or wrong, but I don't know.
I just wanted to say thank you so much, Harald. I think it was a very interesting talk. I also did ballet from the age of 4 to 21 and wasn't professional, but danced with the state ballet company, youth dance company. And my parents wanted me to have more of a corporate career. Fast forward 20 years later, I found myself at a very big tech company working in market research. And in the same org, in this massive company, there were 4 other women who were ex-ballet dancers. And we had a joke, like, is this the profession that people who were ex-ballerinas come into? And we actually did a mapping exercise of what are our, personality traits, characteristics, values. And it was eerily similar, and also something that the job in and of itself shared, right? Like, to be in research, you have to have empathy, listening skills, you need to present, you have to have stage presence, you need to have rigor, you need to have a sense of discipline. Like, there were all these things. So I think life is possible after ballet, but you definitely have to be creative. But there is just a weird community of ex-dancers in the research community. So
I'm not surprised. Wonderful. Thank you, Tanya, for sharing that.
Thank you so much.
Well, Harald, I'd like to really extend our greatest appreciation to you. First, for showing up at 3 a.m. your time to speak with all of us.
You're welcome.
Secondly, to have such a well-crafted presentation for us that not only made a number of really striking points, things that some of us had never thought of before, but also added that questioning element for each of us to really be able to use to reflect upon our own lives, and not just make it a talk about something that you'd gone through in your life, but now how can we apply this in our lives, which I think is what Gems from the Wisdom traditions really is going toward. We come from any discipline, any particular tradition, and if you really get to some of those core elements, some of those gems, you're going to find something that's going to inform the way that you make a choice every moment as you go through your life. So you were really brilliant at bringing that home for us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.